Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's breaking coverage of a financial storm that's gripping Iraq. The exchange rate crisis has just taken a dramatic new turn. For the first time in months, the Iraqi dinar has hit a shocking new low on the parallel market, with the US dollar now trading at more than 144,500 dinars for just $100. This may sound like just another statistic, another headline flashing across the news ticker, but for millions of Iraqis, this number has real consequences. Consequences that touch daily life, food on the table, rent payments, school fees, medicine costs, and even hope for the future. To fully understand why this moment is so significant, we need to step back and see the bigger picture. Iraq's economy is unlike many others. Yes, the country earns vast revenues from oil, and yes, the central bank holds strong reserves. But beneath those numbers lies a fragile system, one where the US dollar has become the beating heart of commerce, trade, and even savings. Unlike countries where the local currency is trusted and relied upon, Iraqis have lived for decades with the belief that the dinar is unstable, prone to devaluation, and vulnerable to political shocks. In response, people turn to the dollar as a safe haven. So when the dollar surges against the dinar on the parallel market, it doesn't just shake financial charts. It shakes trust. Trust in the government. Trust in the central bank. Trust in the future. And today, that trust is once again being tested. Now, let's break down what the term parallel market actually means. Officially, Iraq has an exchange rate determined by the central bank, but in reality, most people, traders, and businesses don't rely on that official rate. Instead, they head to exchange shops, to money changers, to informal networks where the true price of the dollar is revealed through supply and demand. This is what we call the parallel market, and right now, it's roaring out of control. With the rate at 144,500, the gap between the official price and the black market price has grown wider than ever. This gap represents more than numbers. It represents a breakdown between policy and reality. The central bank can say the dollar is worth one amount, but if ordinary Iraqis can only find dollars at a much higher price, then the street rate becomes the real rate. And this divergence is where turmoil begins. Let's walk into the shoes of an average Iraqi family. Imagine a household in Baghdad with a modest income, maybe supported by a government salary or a small business. Just last month, they could buy a week's worth of groceries for, let's say, 75,000 dinars. Today, with the dollar soaring, those same groceries cost closer to 90,000 or 95,000 dinars. Why? Because importers have to pay more dollars to bring food into the country, and those costs are instantly passed on to shoppers. The same goes for fuel, clothing, school supplies, even bread. A small change in the exchange rate on the parallel market ripples across every corner of daily life. But it doesn't stop there. Traders, whether they are importing electronics from Dubai, cars from Jordan, or medicines from Turkey, are now facing a nightmare. Banks are tightening dollar supply. Regulations are stricter. And with cash dollar access restricted, traders are being forced to the street, where they buy dollars at inflated rates. Those extra costs don't disappear. They land squarely on the shoulders of consumers. That means rising prices, shrinking purchasing power, and mounting frustration. So, the natural question arises. Why is the dollar climbing so sharply against the dinar now? The reasons are many, and they intertwine economics, politics, and even geopolitics. Let's start with the central bank. In recent months, it has introduced tighter rules on cash dollar transactions. This move was designed to curb smuggling, prevent money laundering, and respond to U.S. pressure over illicit dollar flows to neighboring countries. On paper, this policy looks like reform, discipline, control, modernization. But on the ground, it's producing shortages. The official channels cannot keep up with the needs of Iraq's traders, and that shortfall is being filled by the parallel market. When supply is limited and demand is high, prices shoot up. There's also the factor of psychology. In uncertain times, people act out of fear. And right now, Iraqis are worried. They fear further devaluation. They fear the dinar collapsing. They fear their savings evaporating. So what do? They rush to buy dollars while they still can. This rush itself fuels more demand, which tightens supply further and drives the rate up again. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. Fear creates demand. Demand creates shortages. Shortages create higher rates, which then deepen fear. Let's not overlook the political pressure either. Iraq is caught in the middle of global and regional currents. U.S. sanctions enforcement, tensions with neighboring states, and domestic political instability all play roles in shaping how dollars move in and out of the country. For ordinary Iraqis, though, the politics matter less than the price of rice, fuel, and medicine. And that's where the frustration is boiling. People see officials promising stability on TV, but in the souks, in the markets, in the shops, reality tells a different story. The central bank may insist that reserves are strong and the economy is stable, but when the parallel rate breaks 144,500, the street says otherwise. And the street, not the official line, is what people live by. Here's another critical element. The gap between rich and poor is widening. Wealthy Iraqis, those with connections, can still access dollars through banks, international accounts, or networks abroad. They can protect their wealth. But the middle class and the poor? They are trapped in the local markets, forced to accept the inflated black market rates. Their salaries don't rise to match inflation. Their costs keep climbing. And their sense of being left behind grows stronger every day. And let's not forget the long-term stakes. If this turmoil continues, confidence in the dinar could erode further, leading more and more Iraqis to abandon it in favor of hoarding dollars. That would weaken the local currency even more, creating a dangerous spiral that's hard to stop. In extreme cases, countries that lose control of their currency face hyperinflation, capital flight, and years of economic instability. Iraq isn't there yet, but today's turmoil is a reminder that the path ahead is fragile. So, ladies and gentlemen, the breaking news today is not just that the dollar has crossed 144,500 dinars on the parallel market. The real story is that Iraq's economy, already fragile, is now facing a dangerous test of confidence. Trust in the dinar, trust in the central bank, trust in the government. All of it is on the line. This is not just an economic story. The next days and weeks will be critical. Will the central bank intervene more aggressively to close the gap? Will it release more dollars to the market? Or will it tighten even further, risking more inflation? Will Iraq's leaders communicate honestly with the people? Or will they continue to promise stability while reality says otherwise? These are the questions hanging in the air tonight. Because when the dollar rises, the pressure rises with it. And at 144,500 dinars per $100, the pressure on Iraq's economy and its people has never been greater.
As we continue our coverage of Iraq's unfolding exchange rate crisis, let's dive deeper into what this turmoil really means for everyday life, for traders, and for the country's economic future. Because the truth is, an exchange rate is not just a number, it's a reflection of power, trust, and survival. And tonight, Iraq's economy is being tested on all three fronts. Let's start with the kitchen table reality. For millions of Iraqi families, the soaring dollar rate is not an abstract concept. It's the difference between being able to afford bread, meat, or cooking oil, or having to cut back, substitute, or go without. Food prices are the first and fastest to respond to exchange rate shocks. Why? Because so much of Iraq's consumption depends on imports. The rice on the shelves, the sugar in your tea, the chicken in the butcher's stall, all of it often comes from abroad. Importers buy these goods in dollars. And when the dollar costs more dinars, those costs immediately get passed down to consumers. Take, for example, the cost of cooking oil, a staple in nearly every Iraqi household. Last year, a liter might have cost 2,000 dinars. Today, with the dollar surging on the black market, the price is closer to 2,500 or even 2,700 dinars. That might not sound like a huge difference to some, but when you multiply that increase across every item a family buys, week after week, the burden becomes crushing. Salaries aren't rising to match inflation. Government workers, shopkeepers, taxi drivers, they're all earning the same dinars they did last month, but those dinars buy less every single day. Now, let's move to fuel. Iraq is an oil-rich nation, but ironically, it still imports refined fuel and other energy products. When the dollar rate rises, so do the costs of those imports. That trickles down into transportation, electricity, and the broader cost of living. A taxi ride that once cost 5,000 dinars is now closer to 6,000. Transporting goods from Basra to Baghdad costs more, which means food and household products become more expensive. The effect cascades. And then there's medicine. Hospitals, pharmacies, and clinics depend heavily on imported supplies. Whether it's basic antibiotics, specialized treatments, or medical equipment, most of it is priced in dollars. For patients, this means higher bills at the pharmacy, higher costs for surgery, and in some cases, an inability to access life-saving treatment. The dollar crisis isn't just an economic issue, it can literally become a matter of health and survival. But what about traders and businesses? They are perhaps the hardest hit. Importers can no longer rely on banks to provide them with dollars quickly. With tighter central bank restrictions, traders are left with two options: wait endlessly for official channels to clear, or pay the inflated black market rate. Most choose the latter because time is money and shipments cannot wait. But this creates a vicious cycle. The more traders rely on the black market, the higher the demand for dollars outside the system. The higher the demand, the higher the exchange rate climbs. It's a loop that feeds on itself, and the central bank struggles to break it. Now, let's talk about the government's real dilemma. On the one hand, Iraqi leaders want to show discipline. They want to prove to international partners, especially the U.S. Federal Reserve, that they can control illicit dollar flows. This is why the restrictions on cash dollar supply were introduced in the first place. But on the other hand, every restriction creates pain at home, rising prices, public anger, and growing mistrust in the dinar. So the government is caught in a bind: tighten too much and the street explodes in anger. Loosen too much and Washington applies pressure or threatens sanctions. It's a balancing act with no easy way out. And while policymakers debate, the black market thrives. Informal money changers are making record profits, buying dollars through whatever channels they can and reselling them at inflated rates. Smuggling networks, too, benefit from this chaos. Dollars that are scarce in Baghdad often find their way across borders, where they fetch even higher premiums. What was meant to be a policy to clamp down on smuggling may ironically be fueling it further by pushing more activity underground. But here's the deeper, more dangerous question: could this turmoil actually push Iraq closer to a currency revaluation, RV? Some believe so. The logic goes like this: by tightening supply now, by making dollars harder to access, the central bank might be laying the groundwork for a stronger dinar in the future. Supporters of this theory argue that Iraq cannot continue living under the shadow of the dollar forever, and that eventually, a bold move, an RV, will be the only way forward. But let's be clear, a revaluation is not as simple as flipping a switch. It requires deep reforms, institutional strength, and confidence both domestically and internationally. And right now, confidence is exactly what Iraq is lacking. So while an RV may be a dream for many, the reality today is that the dinar is weakening, not strengthening. The psychological impact of this crisis cannot be overstated. When people lose faith in their currency, they don't just stop spending. They start hoarding. They convert dinars into dollars, into gold, into land, into anything they believe will hold value. This slows economic activity, stifles investment, and erodes growth. Iraq's young generation, already frustrated with unemployment and limited opportunities, sees the turmoil as yet another reason to doubt their country's direction. Now, let's zoom out to the regional and international dimension. Iraq is not isolated. Its economy is tied to its neighbors and to global oil markets. When dollar shortages hit, trade with Turkey, Iran, Jordan, and the Gulf becomes more complicated. Cross-border flows slow down. Contracts are renegotiated. Trust between partners is strained. International businesses hesitate to engage with Iraqi traders, fearing currency instability. The longer the crisis continues, the more isolated Iraq risks becoming. At the same time, the United States looms large in the story. Because the dollar is central to Iraq's financial system, Washington has enormous influence. Every decision by the Federal Reserve or U.S. Treasury to tighten or relax rules on Iraqi transactions has immediate consequences on the ground. This gives the U.S. leverage not just over Iraq's economy, but over its politics as well. Some argue that the turmoil in the parallel market is not just a financial issue, it's a geopolitical one. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're seeing now is not just the fall of the dinar on the parallel market. We're seeing the fragility of a system exposed. For too long, Iraq has relied on oil revenues to mask deeper structural problems: weak institutions, overdependence on imports, lack of industrial production, and corruption that drains resources before they reach the people. The exchange rate crisis is like a spotlight shining brightly on these weaknesses for the world to see.